The Addams Family conquers pinball. Sega claims lead over Nintendo. And Street Fighter II gets a sequel. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the video game and home computer industries 20, 30, and 40 years ago. Today we're traveling back 30 years to February of 1992. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, unless, of course, your favorite co-host is someone else, Mads. Welcome back, Mads.
Hi, Carl. Thanks for having me.
Oh, always a pleasure, dude. So let's get into the banter. How are you doing right today?
How are you doing? So I'm doing fine, actually. I have been playing a lot of Zelda recently and a lot of Hero as well. Do you remember Hero? Helicopter Emergency Rescue Operation,
oh, yeah.
I guess it was called.
The old Activision title. Yeah,
a lot of Hero as well, and Jumpman Jr. So I've had some time to play some retro games recently, and it's been great.
So are you playing, which system are you playing Hero on, the C64?
Oh yes. That's my preferred version of that game. I know a lot of people, they swear to the Atari 2600 version because it's more clean in the graphics. But I just find the C64, I don't know. I really like the graphics on the C64 as well, and I find it more controllable. So the C64 version is definitely where it's at for me. So
I agree wholeheartedly. That really nice detail that makes it feel like a cavern.
Yeah,
it's just so cool. Yeah.
Wonderful game. And I've actually, listeners of the Retro Asylum won't know this yet, so maybe I'm spoiling the upcoming Finish 'Em episode that we're going to be recording on Retro Asylum, but hey, here you go. You heard it here first, guys. I actually finished Jumpman Jr. It's a game I've been playing for 30-odd years. It's a hard game, hard as rocks, but I've actually finished it now, but using save states, as in I would never save state within a level, but whenever I got to a new level, I would save state there and then learn how to beat that without losing a life, and then get on to the next one. So I feel like I've finished that game, and I think maybe I'm gonna have to go back now that I've actually learned the patterns of all the levels, and see if I can do it in one go, in one sitting.
That is
Jumpman
impressive.
Jr. is such a tough game. I mean, some of these levels, they make Rick Dangerous look like child play.
Yeah, only that you're not going to be killed by invisible spikes that you couldn't have known were there in the first place.
Well, that's only because you haven't been far enough in Jumpman Jr., mate. There's
really?
a level. Jumpman Jr. is a really, really wonderful game, wonderfully designed game. It's only 12 levels, I'd like to say, 10 or 12 levels. And each level changes up the mechanics almost completely. And there is a level where you start out and the entire screen is black. The only thing you can see is the platform directly underneath you, and then you need to discover what's there. And I mean, that is so evil. I think that's maybe the 10th level, something like that. So you're almost through the game. You've only got your 3 or 4 lives, and now they're asking you to explore this level, which means at least, even if you're very, very careful, you have to die there 20 times to figure out what's the layout of this level.
Oh, that's
just consider, you need to play all the way to the 10th level to do that exploring. Doing that without save states, it would take me months.
Well, you know the background why Jumpman Jr. exists after the original Jumpman, right?
No.
Oh, Jumpman Jr. was a pared down version of the original game for release on cartridge. And that's why it has a lot less levels than the original Jumpman. And that's probably why they also put in levels that were so much more difficult than the original Jumpman's standard difficulty, which gets very, very difficult in the higher levels. And I think most, if not all, the levels in Jumpman Jr. also exist in the original Jumpman. They're just in a different order. But there might be 1 or 2 levels that are different. But yeah, Jumpman Jr. was basically just, how do we get this very popular Jumpman game onto cartridge And that's where Jumpman Jr. comes from.
Oh, great. So I've never played the original Jumpman back in the day, so I have no nostalgia for it. I've tried it afterwards, but I've no nostalgia for that. So Jumpman Jr. is definitely my jam here.
Oh, no, Jumpman Jr. was one of the original 12 games that I had for the C64. I had 12 games, and for the first 2 years of owning the system, those were the only 12 games I had.
Yeah.
So I played so much Jumpman. Oh my God! So never did complete it. That is one of the games I should go back. I mean, your way of doing it with not doing save states in the levels, but doing them between levels would actually be a fair way to do it. I keep going back to it. I play Jumpman at least once every year and a half, 2 years. Yeah. I go back and we'll spend a couple days trying to get further into it. And the original Jumpman, I believe, has 4 or 5 levels, which is basically sets of screens based on difficulty.
Yeah.
And I can do the first 2 without a problem. It's after that basically it just starts kicking my ass. So, yeah, no, that would be cool. Does it also have the little animation at the end where you fly off to the moon or something?
No, I think it's just the end screen is just something that says "great job" or something like that.
No, yeah. This was the first time I ever saw like an animated end sequence in a game. Okay. There's this little sequence where he gets onto the ship and the ship goes flying off to the moon because the plot of Jumpman is that you're deactivating bombs on a space station, which makes absolutely no sense. But
well, that's what you're doing. I thought I was just collecting clovers or something like that.
Exactly. I always thought they were donuts as a little kid.
Yeah.
But no, those are supposed to be bombs. That's why if you don't collect them all, the whole screen starts flashing at the end.
Okay.
It's supposed to be bombs.
I can tell you, I've got a picture here of the end screen. It's just Jumpman. He's standing within the O of well done. That's it. It says well done, and Jumpman is still there. So.
Okay. Yeah. Again, it's probably something they pared down due to the very, very small cartridge sizes back then.
Yeah. Okay.
But
that's a great game and a great experience to finally see the entire game. Actually, I figured out after playing this in this way, where I finally got to see all of the levels, that back in the day, I think level 7-ish is the furthest I've ever been. So I could definitely, first 3-4 levels I could do almost blindfolded. But as soon as you get to the 5th, 6th, 7th level, they are so tough. So yeah, probably was my limit back in the day.
Yeah, I think the original has like 20 plus levels, and that's probably why it gets so difficult so fast in Jumpman Jr. because they just basically ramped up the difficulty to make the 10 levels that were on the cartridge or 12 levels that were on the cartridge justified as a purchase problem. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you'd have if that was the only game you had, I'd still say it would take you 2 months to get through it. So.
Oh, at least, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, a good value for money. Also, the cartridge business for Epics was not a good business.
True that.
But yeah, it was not kind to them. Let's just put it that way. Okay. Oh, dude, that is awesome. Congratulations. I know what that feeling is like when you finally get past one of those old childhood traumas. And well done. Well done. My hat is off. Okay, so now that we've talked about great games that you've been playing, our first segment that we have to look at is a little thing called the 7 Minutes in Heaven.
Yeah, even more great games.
Yeah, of course. Where our co-host has to play one of the games that was reviewed in a publication dated February of 1992. Remember, everybody, it's a convention of this show that all the news that we're talking about from February of 1992 was in newspapers and magazines dated February 92, which obviously means that they happened at some time before that. And it's just a convention. Please don't send me an email saying that something happened at an earlier date. Okay. Oh, and also remember, if you don't just want to hear Mads talk about his amazing experience with his 7 Minutes in Heaven, but you actually want to see his amazing experience, become a patron for as little as $1 a month to watch the video versions of all of our 7 Minutes in Heaven segments as of like 6 months ago when we started doing the video versions, and also get early access to our interviews. Remember, we just published the Jerry Jewell interview, co-founder of Sirius Software, Apple II legend. And at the same time, on the same day, we also posted the latest interview that the patrons will get 3 months early with Randall Kotwitz, who was the editor of Softside magazine, as well as one of the founders of Mac User magazine. Inside baseball on magazine publishing in the 80s in the computer area. So that plug being out of the way, Mads, are you ready to go toe-to-toe with The Godfather?
I am indeed.
Excellent. Let's get to it. Welcome back, Mads, from your 7 minutes in heaven. So, for the uninitiated, how would you describe The Godfather?
So how would I describe this? It's a pretty game, and you're controlling Don Corleone in the streets of New York, I guess. And it's a platformer, standard platform affair, but you can't jump. You can just walk, and then you can shoot in, I guess, all 8 directions that your stick can point to. And you need to shoot everybody because everybody on the street is out to kill you. And it is a horrible experience to play because it's slow as if you're moving through molasses. You feel like you need to jump to get away from bullets, but you can't. You can try to dodge them, but even though the bullets are moving really, really slowly, it's hard to move away from them fast enough because you're moving even slower. And it's just painful, isn't it? I mean, there's nothing good here. It's so slow that you feel that you're not really in control. It's so slow that you feel that you can't dodge the very, very slow bullets. And it's so slow that when you want to shoot an enemy that pops out of a window, you need to be standing in the right place when he pops out because it's going to take you an hour or two to get to the window. So there's no chance he'll be there. He's gone out for a snack before you actually go over there. So it's just a turd, isn't it?
An absolute giant turd. Now you only saw the side-scrolling parts. There are sort of first-person shooting gallery sections as well that come later. But yeah.
So you're saying I should stick with this because there's a brilliant game here somewhere?
No. Those are just as bad. Just as bad. And what you are correct. The backgrounds are these wonderfully lush, super detailed scenes of, period 1940s New York and stuff that look awesome. And then you have these sprites that are so your main sprite looks like a little tin soldier from the way the legs move through every other aspect of it. And it's kind of disturbing to see that dichotomy, the contrast between those two.
So the backgrounds and the use of parallax and everything there is really, really cleverly done and beautifully done. But maybe it's a bit too much, or maybe it's just made in an inefficient way because it even the scrolling of the backgrounds moves excruciatingly slow. I mean, just watching the intro hurts a bit because it's just chop, 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 frame by frame. So the Amiga was definitely capable of a lot more than that.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. Now, to put this game into a little bit of historical context, The Godfather is obviously a movie from the 70s originally. Godfather 2 comes out also in the 70s or 1980. I think, no, 70s. It's still 70s. And then Godfather 3 had come out, I believe, in 91. Might be off by a year or two. So when this comes out, The Godfather 3 is still there. Don't think you had it, but there is a title screen that is using the artwork from the Godfather 3 poster. The close-up of Michael Corleone as an old man is one of the shots that is used, even though all the promotional material in magazines for this game is simply using the original black with white text Godfather 1 poster art. So they're clearly, they may not have even had the license proper for Godfather 3. I'm not sure how far the storyline of the game goes. But yeah, and this was US Gold, and as far as I can tell, it's their first movie license and probably their only movie license.
Yeah.
And so they're clearly trying to do something similar to what Ocean had done with the Untouchables and RoboCop and so forth. But that era of the 2D movie license, multi-level changing game mechanics era seems to be over, because in the same month we also get reviews of things like RoboCop 3 from Ocean, which is now a fully 3D game with, driving segments and first-person shooter segments and one-on-one fighting segments, albeit not necessarily the best implementation of those ideas, but it's taking it to that next level, new technology and everything else. And this just seems like it's stuck 5 years too late.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, that scrolling was atrocious. I'm just thinking games like Rough and Tumble, which is probably also one of the technically best Amiga games, but that's a 2D platformer from 94. That's silky smooth scrolling, and if I recall correctly, the graphics are really beautiful there as well, and lots of good action. So the Amiga could definitely do a lot better than this.
Oh, I mean, come on, Turrican 2 is already out at this point.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we have tons of good scrolling, lots of parallax. Apidia is, I think, coming out next month or the month after that. So there's tons of games. Oh, yeah, Apidia is amazing. But it's just one of those things that the system could do it, but this also feels like they also had to shoehorn it into the Atari ST, so they just went with, we're going to do everything in software as opposed to trying to use the actual bespoke hardware of the Amiga to get the scrolling right.
Yeah, that could be.
And they also ported it to DOS, which, again, a system that doesn't have any kind of hardware assistance for scrolling, so just do it all in software and hope for the best. Yeah, it's sad. So I take it this is a wholehearted recommendation to anybody to go out and play US Gold's The Godfather, right?
No, avoid it like the plague.
I somehow get the feeling that there's a pattern developing here of me making you play terrible games.
There is indeed.
Oh, well. Okay, so that's enough with the 7 Minutes of Heaven. Before we can turn on the time machine and head back to February of 1992, there is one more order of business. Namely, we need to check in with our good friend Ethan. We have to check in with our good friend Ethan.
Do you want me to do it?
Go for it.
So we have to check in with our good friend Ethan from the Department of Corrections to see what we got wrong in where we at, Carl?
This would be January of 1992.
Sure. Take it away, Ethan.
Welcome back, Ethan. So, what did we get wrong in January of 92?
Yes, the Department of Corrections coming to you today from not entirely ideal circumstances, but I'm here regardless. So, before we get straight into January 1992, we have the Mads comment. Mads, you're going a little too hard for Luigi's Mansion. I think that you were extolling its virtues a little too hard. It's a good game. It's not a great game. I think you just need to lay off the Luigi's Mansion praise just a little bit.
Okay, I think we can understand that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting little game, but yeah, it does not deserve to be in the annals of the classics. Though I am interested to play like Luigi's Mansion 3 if I ever get the chance. But yes, that is a entirely different matter. Now we will get into your grade, your pay grade, as it might be said. or you pay for the fact of getting graded or something. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what I'm going with this. All right, first up.
It's late. Go for it.
Yes. The Spectrum Holobyte virtuality system that you talked about in the January 1992 jump, it appears that it was tested. It's all very vague, so I'm not entirely sure exactly how far it got, but I presume that it was sort of a product. I sent you a couple links which you can put in the show notes, which seem to imply that they did test whatever game that they created for the virtuality system.
Okay, so it got at least to that level, but we don't have any actual data about it being released.
Yeah, I've never seen any, I've never seen any screenshots or anything like that, though I didn't really research it that hard, but I did try to make sure that, like, you said that it never appears to have come out, but it does appear to have been test marketed in some degree.
That's cool. Would be fun to actually find those prototypes.
Yes, the whole 90s virtual reality thing, both virtuality and then there were a bunch of other companies too, hasn't been preserved very well, but that is a blanket space if you want to start looking into that.
It would be fun.
Okay, then we have the Joe Montana for Genesis story. So you got this entirely wrong. So let me lay this out for you. So Electronic Arts at the time was creating a football game. It was not initially a Madden game. They were creating a football game for the Genesis as one of their first products under license, because they confirmed a license in the middle of making it. At the same time, Activision was working on, for Sega, the Joe Montana football game. But in the middle of
Activision.
Activision was starting to make the Joe Montana football game, and then Activision went bankrupt in the middle of that.
Yeah, makes sense from a timeline.
Yes. So then Sega turns to Electronic Arts and asks them, "Can you make Joe Montana football?" And what they decide to do is they take the football game that they are working on for the Genesis and do a quick development of Joe Montana football for January 1991, and then later they use that same technology to develop into the first Madden game for the Sega Genesis, just called John Madden Football.
Okay, but they both get reviewed the same month.
Okay, so yeah, I'm off on the timeline, I think.
Yeah.
No, I think Joe Montana Football came out in January 91. So maybe they were reviewing Joe Montana Football 2, or maybe they were just lumping them together. I mean, this happens a lot in the game magazines. We're comparing two equal products.
Yeah. I mean, if they don't come out at the same time, they come out very, very close to one another.
Yeah, I know the Madden one wasn't that far behind. They didn't wait until next Christmas to release it, I don't think. Yeah, but I'm not entirely sure on this, but whatever you said as the summary for why Joe Montana Football exists, you were wrong. That, Carl.
So I was going off the story Michael Katz told, but he only had the point of view of, he mentioned that he couldn't remember which company had failed the development of Joe Montana, and then he turned to EA and said, "Hey, do you guys have something for me?" So from his standpoint, it was basically just, do you guys have
so that was Activision
development there? Yeah.
Yeah, and we do have to give credit to Michael Katz, because a lot of sources do not give him this credit, that he was the one that negotiated with EA to publish on the Genesis. I mean, they were trying to circumvent it, but he was the guy who made it official. Because if you read Console Wars, they say that was all Tom Kalinske, and that's not true.
Yeah, no. Michael Katz doesn't get nearly the props he needs to get for so many developments in the industry.
Yes, though, it's there's historical minutia. There might be some things he's claiming a little bit more credit for than he deserves.
Of course.
But the guy who's had a super long, successful career, he deserves his own biography. But yeah, we'll leave that. Move on. Last thing in the Department of Corrections for January 1992, Activision. You said that it was named so that in trade show things that it would be ahead of Atari, but that's not true. That's true for Acclaim. Acclaim was specifically named that to be ahead of Activision, but Activision was not named as such to be ahead of Atari. Activision was not even the first choice of the name, so.
That's true. And also Accolade before Acclaim also pulled that trick.
But does that go?
Yeah, no, Accolade is before Acclaim. Way before.
No, it's not. O is after L.
Yeah, no. That's what I mean is, Accolade is made up. No. So Activision is formed. Then a few guys leave Activision and form Accolade. So now they're ahead of Activision. And Acclaim is also formed by one of the former Activision people, Joe Fischbach. He's one of the guys from Activision, and he comes up with Acclaim, co-founds Acclaim, and they're then ahead of Accolade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew it was something along these lines.
Yeah, but yeah, Accolade was in that same system before Acclaim comes out.
Yeah, I forgot what the founding timeline is, but yeah, Activision was not that. Activision wasn't even their first choice. So that is all we have to say for January 1992. You can pull up your bootstraps and move along to February of 19.
And we will do it with aplomb. Thank you very much, Ethan, as always, and until next time.
So, Carl Pop quiz here. Who wanted to be ahead of Atari?
Acclaim wanted to be ahead. Yes. They wanted to be at the top, although by the time Acclaim comes around, Atari isn't the issue anymore, but Activision is.
They should have chosen to be called Aardvark games instead.
Which one?
Aardvark, or isn't that how you pronounce it?
Aardvark
games. That would have been better. Get a double A in there.
Yeah, or then, or just say triple A.
Oh, yeah.
A game.
That'd be a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do this. Or you just decide that nobody's looking up a game publisher in the phone book, and just be done with it. That might also be an option.
Yeah.
But those early days, you gotta love it, especially since everybody. Well, I mean, even to this day, everybody in the industry appears to know everybody else in the industry, and they're always jumping from one company to the other. So it makes sense. Oh well, okay. Let us turn on the time machine and head back to February of 1992.
The Sega CD, 1992. Joystick into a whole new world.
Welcome to February of 1992. Mads, what's our first headline?
Can you guess it? Come.
I can guess it, and I'm really hoping that wasn't too long for the copyright holders. But
so Addams Family pinball launches.
What will become the best-selling pinball table of all time, the Addams Family, based on the Raul Julia movie, gets a lavish launch party with MC Hammer on site to promote it.
So I remember this table. That was a great table to play.
Oh, yeah. It's an amazing table. It does have the one thing that really irks me in some pinball tables, that little magnetic hold thing. It's just because the magnetic hold is not really something that you can predict the outcome of.
Oh, that's true.
And I'm one of those people who I'm not great at pinball, but when I do play pinball, I want to be able to have that control over the ball. It's about the angles and stuff. And that kind of irks me when something like that gets activated. I'm like, no. I'm supposed to be the one. If it screws up, it should be my fault and not, the tables. But no, every other aspect of that table is amazing. So, yeah. So
I was never good enough at pinball to be annoyed by that. When I was playing pinball, it was just pressing the buttons as quickly as I can, I think. I was quite good at the video game part of the arcades. Pinballs, I love to play them, but I never got good at them.
And I never got good at them until I was working in an arcade in Seattle Funplex. So if anybody out there still remembers Seattle Funplex, drop us a line. But great arcade and bunch of pinballs, but they were all 50 cents a play. So, on my lunch breaks, I would always gravitate to the games where I'd get the most out of my quarters.
Yep.
But they had one pinball table that was 25 cents, and that was the Batman game based off of the 89 movie, which also comes out a little bit before this time, a few months before this.
Yeah.
Amazing table, one of the first ones to have interactive elements that play with the dot matrix screen. So you had Terminator 2 and the Batman one coming out, I think, roughly the same time. And I got so good at that one. Oh my God, I knew all the angles. I knew, which timing to do. If you're coming off of this ramp, you're going to have this much power, and then you should try to shoot this angle. Do you remember the game Stunt Car Racer?
Yes.
Okay. You know how to get good at that game, to actually be able to play it and avoid getting the permanent damage, you had to hit each ramp at a very specific speed.
Yes.
There was a key speed for each jump. And if you knew that exact speed, you could get through almost every level until you got to the drop at bridge one. That one became a little bit more problematic. I knew the ins and outs of Batman. I could literally, my 30-minute lunch break, I could spend it on 1/4 on this table. That's how good I got at it.
Yeah.
But
I always thought that was too hard to predict what was happening on a pinball table, because this is actually real world physics. So sometimes the ball would be coming in at a 20% more speed than you're used to, and you'll be totally off. And I mean, on a computer, I loved playing the pinball games on the Amiga, for example, Pinball Fantasies, Pinball Dreams, and so on. There, I knew pretty much what was going on. I could rack up some really, really high scores, but there's so much fewer variables to consider when it's just a simulation. In the real world, there was so much going on.
Well, that's the thing with the pinball tables of this era. Because of the computer control, there's also this proliferation of a much larger quantity of ramps. We're really getting to the point where everything is a bunch of little ramps. The ultimate version of this, and it's still my favorite table, is Medieval Madness. And it's literally, you've got the flippers at the bottom, a big open field for the most part. There's still some targets and stuff on the sides, but it's then a series of ramps and chutes at the top. And because these ramps are so long, it doesn't really matter how much power you get onto the ramp with, because once it does the curve and everything and comes back, it's pretty much coming back every single time with the same amount of energy.
Yeah, and the exact same trajectory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now suddenly it becomes a very predictable thing.
Yeah, I see that.
And then it's just about getting the timing right. At what millimeter of the flipper are you engaging? And it becomes a very predictable thing. This is why a true pinball wizard is basically just going to be playing through and hitting every target every time, because real world physics is repeatable. There is no random factor. It's if you can judge that speed, you're going to get it right.
Yep.
And but it takes a lot of practice, and that's always the problem with pinball, is you have to spend so much time playing the same table. And if you have to pay 50 cents a pop, you're probably not going to get that good at it. But suddenly I was, this captive audience, and there were two machines that I played. I worked there for like 9 months, and there were two machines that I played to death. G.I. Joe, which to this day one credit I can get through 3/4 of the game on one credit without losing a life. Back then I could get all the way to the final boss, Cobra Commander, without losing a life. That bastard is just so freaking cheap that'll cost me another three credits to kill him back in the day. And the other one but that was a memorization thing. Once you memorize the pattern, it was done. And the other one was the Batman pinball game. Those were the only two games I played in there pretty much for the whole 9 months. Okay. But yeah, no, pinball is an amazing thing. But yeah, no, Addams Family is going to be huge. Later on, there's going to be a special celebratory edition of the table that's released to celebrate the fact that it's the most sold one with a gold ball in it. So you might see this, and I think the flippers are also gold colored.
Okay.
So if you ever see that one out in the wild, that's a very limited edition table that came out afterwards. Sorry.
Yeah. Almost never see pinball tables anymore, but
yeah, I know, it's so sad, and there's so
but
many
it seems
good
like
ones coming out.
there may be no pinballs in the arcade of the future, but the future of the arcade is 3D.
Nice transition, good job.
Thanks.
As part of a larger discussion in this month's Play Meter magazine about how coin-op can stay ahead of the console market, the future of 3D gaming is discussed. Beside the so far lackluster returns on virtuality, friend of the show Kevin Hayes explains how Namco has been pushing the envelope in Japan with high-end and very pricey gaming experiences, highlighting Galaxian 3, a 360-degree projection screen multiplayer 3D shooter sequel to the side-scrolling classic. While the game is not suitable for location-based coin drop, the idea that coin-op has to go big and high-tech to keep up is clear.
360-degree projection screen.
Yes.
What was that? Do you know?
Okay, there's a link in the show notes to this. Yeah. And remember, everybody, everything we talk about is linked in the show notes below. So check that out. This thing looks amazing. So what it is it's the people enter into this round room, and there's I think it's 12 seats, and each of the seats is in a circle around a column in the middle. Yeah. Above them are the projectors. So, like an old projection television set. And there's screens in front of them creating the 360 degrees. And there is a 3D rendered of these ships flying around. I'm guessing it's real time because it's unshaded polygons from the images. But it could be partially pre-rendered, but I'm guessing it's real time.
So this is more of a ride, really, than an arcade game, isn't it?
Yeah, and the way it works is that you pay for so many minutes in the game.
Yeah.
So it's not a straight up, when you die you have to leave, because then you'd be walking in front of the other people. And you have this gun, and you're basically just moving the cursor, as far as I can tell, around the screen, shooting at the ships flying by you and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and this is the example that they give. They also talk about some other high-tech gizmos in this article, but this was the one that really caught my eye because it is – we've been talking about it basically since the show started, that even though there's a few big hits in the arcades, going into the 90s, the arcades are in a serious decline. Everybody's always talking about, okay, well, we did Double Dragon and a billion variations all the way up through Final Fight. There's Street Fighter 2, which we will talk about, has brought some new life into everything, but nothing else really seems to be grabbing people's attention. And the NES is just kind of the herald of this, is the one that's bringing it back. And especially for the operators that are not running arcades, but the ones who have the so-called street locations where they put up a machine or two in a laundromat or in a pizzeria or someplace like this. One of the most profitable machines they have are the Play Choice machines, which are basically just NESs with a bunch of NES cartridges in them that people pay money for a limited amount of time to play a home game in the arcade. Yeah. So, it's like, why would somebody bother getting in their car, coming over, instead of going to Blockbuster and renting a Super Nintendo or Genesis cartridge for the night?
Yeah.
So,
true.
And just as a little side note, in Replay magazine, they're also talking about the tech side of this. And Edison Brothers, we've talked about them the last couple months. They're now the U.S. distributors for virtuality. And they're trying to drum up support for it. And we finally and this is the first time I've seen a listed price for a virtuality unit. And they're going for $55,000 a pop.
Wow. You need a big arcade to buy a couple of those.
if you're going to put a couple of these in here, I mean, even if you're charging $1 a play, you're going to have a lot of plays before this thing pays for itself.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just insane. But oh well.
But you just mentioned Street Fighter 2, so Street Fighter 2 to get a sequel.
Yes. By early March, a sequel to Street Fighter 2 that adds 4 new playable characters will be hitting arcades. Capcom promises that this new game will be released in only limited quantities and won't be available as a kit, as they want to make sure that the cabinet has enough room for the 12 action buttons and space for players to move.
So what's the sequel called? Street Fighter 2
this is Champion Edition. So this is the one where the 4 boss characters, Vega, Sagat, M. Bison, and what's the name of the boxer character? I can't remember his name right now. Yeah, I'll think of it when I don't need it. M. Bison was the name of the boxing character in Japan, and they moved it around because it sounded too much like Mike Tyson, and they were going to get sued. So yeah. But it doesn't matter. They moved all the names around when they brought it to the West. And Balrog. That's it. And Balrog is the name of M.
Speaking of Raul Julia, that you talked about from the Addams Family, isn't he the guy who played the M. Bison in the Street Fighter 2 movie?
Yes, he plays M. Bison in the Street Fighter 2 movie in like 2 years from this point.
Yes. Wonderful movie, of course. And then we get games that we go full circle. We have Street Fighter 2, the movie, the game. It's brilliant.
Exactly. Sadly, Raul Julia's last movie. He was already quite sick when he made the movie.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And so it was his last film. Not necessarily the best way to go out, but it is a movie that has its own charm. I will defend Street Fighter, the movie, because it was not intended to be taken seriously. They were going for a Batman 66 style cheekiness, and they succeeded wonderfully.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in many years, but I have a weakness for a lot of these video game adaptations. I think I get my rose-tinted glasses on when I watch those.
Oh, and it's perfectly valid, just like the first Mortal Kombat movie is cheesy as hell, but amazing.
You need to watch Double Dragon. I've told you that before. Double Dragon, the movie, is just pure 90s cheese. It's wonderful.
We will do the watch along at some point. We'll get it together, just like we did for the 100th episode where we did the 7 Minutes in Heaven. We will do Double Dragon at some point. I know I have to. But yes, but the interesting thing here, and I'll put a link to this again in the show notes. We just talked about Kevin Hayes. He was working for Namco at the time. They had originally designed the U.S. cabinet for Street Fighter II. And it was a much wider cabinet. Well, not much wider, but it was a wider cabinet than usual. Basically, because of this, they needed those extra buttons. And at this point in time, most arcade games are coming out in what they call kit forms. So it's just basically the board and the controllers and some artwork so you can adapt existing cabinets. And they're really trying to prevent a normal width cabinet from getting this game, basically because of all the buttons and everything else. Also, you can charge a lot more.
Yes, of course.
And I mean, an existing Street Fighter 2 cabinet should, in theory, without a problem, be able to be converted into this. But Capcom knows they have a cash cow, and they know that everybody wants every new version of this, especially since, as we just talked about last month, Street Fighter 2 is coming to the home. So if you want to be better than the home version that's coming out for the Super Nintendo, you better have Champion Edition in the arcade. And this is just the first of a lot of modifications of Street Fighter 2 that are going to be hitting the arcades. Always, just a 2 or 3 steps ahead of the home ports of the same upgrades. Yeah. So Capcom has a cash cow that they are going to milk for a very long time.
Yeah, understandably, of course.
Yes. Okay.
Ready to move away from the arcade business and into the consoles, I guess, because Sega claims lead over Nintendo.
While the final numbers for Christmas aren't out yet, some initial reports are suggesting that Genesis may have outsold the Super Nintendo at retail in the USA over Christmas. This would be a huge upset as NES sales have flattened, despite still being a massive juggernaut and the Game Boy outperforming all of them together. No, not together, but all of them.
Yeah, well, this didn't last, did it?
It didn't last, and the best numbers that we can come up with nowadays suggest that it didn't happen in the first place.
Oh, okay.
So Sega is basically promoting this idea that they've outsold Nintendo in this Christmas season. And
it did happen in other territories, though. I feel certain that the Mega Drive actually sold better than the Super Nintendo in the UK, for example.
Well, there's a couple things you have to calculate here. This was the Super Nintendo's first Christmas in the US.
Yeah.
It's their second Christmas in Japan. It won't come out for at least another year in Europe. So there's this much larger lead time in Europe for the Genesis.
Yes.
Over the Super Nintendo. Okay. Also remember that the NES never had the same footing, and Sega is coming in with a lot of arcade ports, which, as we've seen with we've talked about how US Gold is just now beginning to step back from arcade ports to home computers. But the arcade ports are still a massive component of the home computer game market, especially in the UK. So there's still a huge draw. This month, Sinclair User, I believe it was, has, massive one-page ad for Space Gun. And it's like the top game reviewed this month.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers Space Gun, really. But it was a huge deal because it was an arcade game getting ported to the Speccy. And so the draw of the Sega machines of the Genesis is the arcade ports at this point. And so, yeah, there is that. And the Genesis does do better, at least for a long time, than the Super Nintendo. Once the Super Nintendo really takes off in like year 2 or year 3, I don't know if it's really going to be that much. But by then, we're already coming into the time of the PlayStation. By then, it's going to be 95. So here we're 92. It's going to come out, I believe, Christmas of 92 is the launch of the Super Nintendo. Means it only got 3 years before the PlayStation hits.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of those weird situations here where Europe is this parallel world where everything is far delayed.
Yes.
But yeah.
I remember.
I mean, the Master System obviously sold much better than the NES, but that's also a slightly different topic because Nintendo just didn't care about Europe. They saw it as too expensive a market to get into, and they only started pushing because they were afraid of U.S. regulatory action.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you're right. The Genesis is going to sell much better in Europe, at least for a good long while. But in the States, even with the boom that is Sonic the Hedgehog, they're not going to beat out Nintendo at Christmas. And that's just the Super Nintendo. The NES still outsells both of them this Christmas.
Yeah.
And the Game Boy sells even more than that. It's insane. It's Nintendo everywhere.
Yeah. Just like today, where they are making records with the Switch again.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's Nintendo. I mean, it just never bet against Nintendo. They may stumble, but it's going to take a lot for them to fall.
Yeah. So Nintendo loosens licensing restriction.
Faced with increased pressure from Sega, Nintendo has loosened its restrictions on software licensees. Originally, they had set a limit of 3 Super NES titles per year per licensee, with the exception of titles that scored 30 points or higher on Nintendo's internal rating system. Then the titles didn't eat up one of the precious 3 slots. Now Nintendo has doubled the number of available slots to 6.
See, I like this system. I like the fact that if you make a game that they deem to be so good that it gets more than a certain amount of points, it doesn't take up one of your slots there. You can just keep on making more games. I mean, today we have so many shovelware games. It's hard to find the good ones.
Well, and back then you did too. I mean, just look at all the crap Acclaim put out alone. Then LJN, and there were a ton of terrible, terrible games.
Look at most of the Atari 2600 games. I mean,
well, that was just unbridled nuts. But this system is a little bit fairer, I will say, but it's also a sign that this 30-point system didn't exist for the NES. Okay, this is something that they introduced for the Super Nintendo. It was already a concession because they finally had competition. And now that they're allowing 6, remember, right around this time, Sega is running a bunch of print ads where they show, its cloud cover at the bottom, and then there's a Genesis at the top of the page stacked on this giant pile of Genesis cartridges. And at the very bottom, just peeking out above the clouds, is a Super Nintendo with a tiny little pile of games underneath it. And the ad is, we have all these games. Why would you go with the system that has no games? And so Nintendo does have to play a little bit of catch up, and I think also they were caught off guard by the strength of Sonic. They did not expect Sega to be able to pull off a proper mascot, and they need to bring in more people, more development. They need to be able to take up more retail shelf space.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense. So,
they will.
In more Sega news,
yes,
Sega settles with Razorsoft.
We've talked several times, most recently in our November 91 jump, about the legal battle between Sega and Razorsoft over approval of games, in particular Stormlord. Apparently, the dispute has been settled with Razorsoft getting permission to once again use Sega markings for their games.
So remind me again, what was that the legal battle over?
Okay, Stormlord. So Razorsoft is a subsidiary of what used to be Hewson. Hewson went broke. Hewson, famous UK computer game developer, games like Iridium and Deliverance and so forth. And Stormlord was a sequel to Deliverance, and it was a problem because there's in the original PC version, there's these save points or health restoration points in the game that are these fairies, and they have large uncovered bosoms. Obviously, you can't do that in the U.S. console market, and so there was this back and forth, should the fairies be covered up? Should the fairies be removed altogether? Blah, 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 blah. And Razorsoft went ahead and started releasing the game anyway, and the packaging and the ads said that it had the Sega seal of approval. Sega then, was like, no, and I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but said, no, we didn't give you the license to do this. And so they've been going back and forth about this approval for a while, and now they've settled all of this. Razorsoft can continue to release games for the system, and it's one of those moments where we can see it's the struggle over how many games do you have eating up, how much space can you take up on the shelf, and now both companies are fighting for third-party support. And this is a battle that's going to keep going for a while, because now it's really seen as, if I can eat up more space at retail than you, then I look more impressive, and there's this is where the console war really gets going.
Yeah, correct.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So Maxivision is bringing a boatload of games to your NES.
Oh yeah, this one's great. As the NES market begins to lose steam and the legal status of unlicensed games becomes clear, Maxivision, a company out of Las Vegas, has announced that they will be releasing a 30-in-1 game cart for just $149. The Maxivision cart would ultimately get pared down to just 15 titles made up largely of existing unlicensed games and be promoted through a TV infomercial hosted by Hulk Hogan.
So why would they be allowed to bring out unlicensed games?
Well, we've been talking about this. We've done several stories on this over the last year or so. There were a couple of big disputes, lawsuits that Nintendo had filed against several different parties over different ways that people had worked around the lockout chip. The most famous, obviously, was the Atari Tengen thing, where Atari had screwed up the way to do it. But a couple other companies had actually done proper clean rooms and gotten their games out. Nintendo did then release a revised version of the NES with a modified chip that then blocked those games. Same thing that Sega did that we reported on the last couple episodes. They did the same thing with the new versions of the Genesis that launched with that came out with the Sonic pack-in. And which is going to get them into trouble because they went ahead and we've talked about it last month. They added in a little message saying, all games that run on this, and I'm paraphrasing, all games that run on this system were, licensed by Sega. Yes. And the unlicensed people over at Accolade with their ballistic label are going to say, wait. You just put something in here that makes people think that our game was licensed by you. We didn't license it. We did a proper clean room. And that's going to get Sega into trouble. But that's another issue entirely. They're going to settle that as well. Ballistic will become a licensee. Now, Maxivision is buying up these unlicensed games like some of the Bible games may be on there. I didn't check the list. But these are really, for the most part, unbelievably bad, terrible games that you don't want to play. And they're going to have this infomercial where for 3 small payments of $49, you can get the Maxivision. And this whole commercial is set up like a big contest with these people playing all the games, to win some big prize with Hulk Hogan, be like, come on down. And there's a link to it in the show notes. It's really terrible.
So a $149 cartridge sounds crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, a standard cartridge at this time is costing you $40-$50.
Yeah, so I guess if they were actually 15 quality titles, it wouldn't have been too bad.
If it would have been 5 quality titles, it would have been an amazing price.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're all garbage.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's not a away single from the pile of garbage then.
Worth spending time on. Yeah. Let's move away from that.
Yes, and go to one of the best computers ever made. Yes. C64 racks up Christmas sales.
According to Commodore Format magazine, the C64 moved 100,000 units over the holiday season in the UK. Now, I'm guessing that they're talking UK and not worldwide. They may be counting in other territories as well. It's not clear. But considering that the machine was introduced 10 years earlier at CES, so it's not quite 10 years on the market, but close to 10 years old on the market, that's pretty respectable.
Yeah, this blows my mind. I mean, 1992.
Yeah.
How can so this Christmas sales from 1991, I guess.
Yeah.
But still, how can they still be shifting that many machines? It's incredible.
Well, you have to remember, it's the console market. If you're looking at it from a parent's standpoint in Europe, I can buy an NES for almost the same price as Commodore 64 with a tape drive at this point.
Yeah.
But each game is going to cost you a small fortune.
Yes.
The machine comes with like 4 games or something. The Terminator 2 pack, I think, is not out yet, maybe coming out. I don't think it's out yet.
The whole homework issue, Carl. I mean, all of us used our C64s or our home computers for doing our homework, of course.
Yes, I actually did one homework assignment as a child on my C64. So,
Yeah, me too.
But the idea that the software is so cheap and you can still justify it as a computer, and that's just the nature of this, that it's a cheap piece of kit at this point. And so it's still moving units. Now, granted, this is tape. They're doing it on tape. If they were trying, they probably couldn't have moved this many units if they were packing in a disk drive with it, because that would have just made the machine too expensive.
If you needed a 1541, it'll be too expensive. It costs the same as the machine, I guess, back at that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and always did, because it had its own processor and everything in it. Had they been able to cost reduce the disk drive, and there were a few, and the 1571 I think is a cost reduction of some level, even though it has some additional features. But yeah, I mean, for the British and the Spanish market, which is also still somewhat active at this point, it's all tape based. So yeah. And by this point,
in Denmark most of the time anyway.
Yeah, by this point in Germany, for example, it's a completely dead market. But yeah, go figure.
Yeah, so I was definitely rocking my A500 at this time.
Yeah, I had just gotten my A500. Early 91 I got mine. So yeah, good old days.
So speaking of the Amiga, Commodore raises price of Amiga 2000.
Apparently, Commodore has seen the demand for its Amiga 2000 soar so much in the professional video market that it has raised the price of the now 5-year-old machine by $400. The pre-holiday suggested retail price of $1,600, which was reduced over the holidays to just $999, has been jacked up to $2,000. This follows a month after a price hike for the Video Toaster add-on card, which has made the 2000 an essential tool for TV production.
So they just upped the price by a bit more than 100%.
Yeah.
From the holiday sale.
From the holiday sale price, yes. They doubled it. And it's because, I mean, now this is all the U.S. In Europe, it's a different story. But this is what's happening in the U.S. market, where the A500 is an almost non-entity. And the 2000 really only exists. I remember I did see this letter someplace in one of the magazines a couple months earlier, where somebody was complaining that they went into a dealer's showroom and they were looking at the Video Toaster, and the dealer was talking about how the Video Toaster was this great tool that you could do all this stuff with. Never once, while they're showing them this, mentioned that the Video Toaster is running inside of an Amiga. The Amiga was the non-issue. It was, you're buying the Video Toaster, here's this box, Video Toaster. Even though it says Amiga on it, the fact that the Amiga was a computer that just happened to have this Video Toaster add-on card wasn't even an issue. You just needed the Amiga to get there.
Okay.
And that seems to be the reason for the price hike. Is they're like, we're not selling to average Joe Blows anymore. We've lost that market. But these guys in TV production, they've got the cash. Why not?
Yeah. I can see why they do that. I remember seeing the 2000s with the Video Toaster, and then still running. Actually, many years later, I was working as a consultant in 97, 8, something like that. I remember sometimes coming out to customers, and there'd still be at the schools, there'd be these multimedia labs, and they would have 1 or 2 Amiga 2000s with the Video Toaster in them, because that was still better than the PCs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially if you needed to output an analog television signal at the end of the day. Because a VGA card isn't going to be doing you scan line by scan line calculation.
Nope.
And so, that's what the Video Toaster was for. I mean, my high school in the States also had 2 A2000s sitting there with Video Toasters in them. Yeah. And the students, would do 3D renders and stuff with them. So
they found a market there for a while.
Oh, definitely. For a little while. It's not going to last, but for a little while, they still had some relevance there.
Yes. So next piece of news is that Broderbund go public. Broderbund is to go public.
There you go. Broderbund's long road to an IPO is finally coming to an end. After its failed 1987 bid, through its failed merger with Sierra, they have finally announced that they will go public with over 3 million shares priced between $9.50 and $11 per share. The IPO would be a huge success and will be a pretty big windfall to those involved, until it's not.
You big tease. Why?
Yeah.
Until it's not. So tell us the story. Come on.
Well, if you want to hear that story, you've got to listen to my interview with Gary Carlson.
Yes.
Who goes into it in quite great detail. They are going to be doing quite well for quite a while, until, of course, certain market factors finally catch up with them. The problem is Broderbund is really just 3 products. It's Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, Print Shop, and actually I think it's just those 2 products. I know I'm forgetting a third product.
Prince of Persia is not something anymore that they can sell.
It's not an evergreen, the way that the other 2 are programs that basically sell every year, like hotcakes, and they're easy to update and keep fresh. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas Prince of Persia, you're not going to be popping out a new Prince of Persia every year. I mean, Jordan Mechner took forever just to do the first one.
Yes.
And this is why that really stable income is not going to be there. Now, one of the things that they did do in order to secure that a little bit is they've announced that they extended the affiliated label agreement with Maxis, the makers of the Sim City and Sim Earth and all those games. They've extended their agreement with them through February of '93. And if you've listened to my interview with Don Daglow, you know how that original arrangement to be the distributors for the original SimCity came about. Even though Broderbund could have tried to strong arm Will Wright into making them the publisher, they did stay on as the affiliated label. That will expire. Maxis is going to go and do their own thing after a while, but this is going to help give them some more hot product to sell. But yeah, Broderbund is going to run into problems. But the principals, the people who have been with the company for a long time, who have been waiting for this IPO, are going to make a lot of money on it, as long as they sell in time.
Yes. That's how it is with these things, isn't it?
Yeah, it always is. It always is. I mean, once you go public, you lose control over it, unless you're still the owner of a considerable, almost controlling share of the stock.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when you get people like Bill Gates who hold on to enough of the stock that they can control Microsoft, or at least have enough of a say that nobody's going to contradict them. Bezos, the same thing with Amazon. But there's so many of these stories. When I talked to Ken Williams, same story with Sierra. Once he loses control of the company, game over.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, that was a bit of a sad story.
Yeah.
So speaking of people who have too much money, it seems, Nintendo makes bid for Mariners.
Nintendo has moved to purchase the Seattle baseball team, the Mariners. The move comes along with some controversy surrounding foreign ownership of the baseball team, but according to the New York Times, has also sparked debate in Japan about what it would mean if foreigners were involved in their traditional sports. Nintendo patriarch Hiroshi Yamauchi admits to not understanding either video games nor baseball, but frames the move to buy the team as a way to prevent them from leaving Seattle and helping the town that has headquartered his American subsidiary for so long. There is even a musing that the seat of the company may move to the U.S., considering the size of the U.S. market and the fact that they have more employees in the U.S. than in Japan.
So do they actually end up buying the Mariners?
Yes, and this is one of those things that I think gets a little bit misunderstood. There's an entire chapter in The Ultimate History of Video Games. If you want to hear more about this, listen to our special episode, Deconstructing that book. Wow, I'm doing a lot of cross-promotion this evening. But the longer the show keeps going, I've just talked about too many other topics with other things. But the thing here is that there's an entire chapter in the book about the purchase of the Mariners. And it really is something of a cultural issue, because baseball had, at least, I mean, it still in name has, America's pastime. It's supposed to be the great American game, even though not nearly as many people will watch it as football, or for the most part, I think even basketball. Baseball is been on the decline for a very long time, but the fact that you have this foreign company buying it was a controversial thing at the time, especially because we're still seeing this idea of the Japanese company, selling video games to our kids. What is it doing culturally to us? Why aren't we the ones dominating video games? And there's a lot of people who are still talking about the Super NES and there's a bunch of articles that repeated this being a scam, Oh, I just bought an NES for my kid a year ago, and now they're coming out with the Super NES, and I can't use the cartridges in it. It's a scam, that phrase gets thrown out a ton at around this time. And so there's still a lot of, there's openly racist sentiment going on here with this. So it was a big deal, but at the same time, and this is hard for non-American listeners to understand, the American professional sports system with its franchises means a league will determine how many teams they're going to allow. And it's not like, for example, a European soccer league where you can rise up from the lower leagues. And if you're the top team in your lower league, next season you're going to be in the upper league. And the upper league team can fall down. That doesn't happen. Once you own one of these franchises, you own the team. No matter how shitty your team is, you will forever be in the league. You will forever get to play all the other teams that season.
That doesn't sound really fair when you're used to the European system, where you actually need to be good to deserve to be in the leagues.
Exactly. And don't even get me started on the whole recruiting from the college league. So again, unlike a European one where, the European clubs will have the junior teams where they're fostering young kids up through the ranks, to someday maybe make it into the professional team. No. What you do in the States is you let the taxpayer foot the bill for that in high school and middle school with teams. Then they go mostly to state-run universities, and they don't get paid. So these athletes are going there, and as long as they don't get injured, they get to also take classes. But then again, they're also doing like 50 hours a week of training plus traveling to the games. So, yeah, most of them don't get what you would call a top quality education.
No.
And then at the end, there's this big ceremony called the draft, where the teams get to pick from all the players in the college league that want to go are going to try to go professional. Mm-hmm. So now they basically get picked up by these big owners of the teams, and then they play for those teams, and the worst team in the league gets to pick first.
Okay.
So the idea is that even if you're the crappiest team, well, if you get to pick the best new recruits, then the next season you're going to have an advantage over the other guys.
Yeah. Okay.
So in theory, you do this over a couple of years, even the worst team is going to have enough good players that they're going to be competitive.
Yeah. It's kind of makes sense.
It kind of makes sense as long as you don't see it as a merit-based system and more of a we need to keep churning out and making sure that every game is as competitive as possible for higher ratings.
True.
And yeah, it's a really weird system. So this is why the Mariners probably could have left Seattle. They threatened to leave Seattle so many times because they didn't like the stadium, the Kingdom, because it didn't have a retractable roof, because Seattle, it rains all the time. You never freaking retract the roof. And all this other stuff. Now, granted, the Kingdom was a huge mess, and a few years after this, they will demolish it because it's falling apart.
Okay.
It was this giant. I can go into it. I'm from Seattle. It's a long story.
Yeah, I've only been in Seattle once. I did actually see the stadium then, but that's only like 12, 15 years ago.
Okay, yeah. By then the Kingdom was gone, and then they had a separate stadium for baseball and a separate one for football.
Okay.
And yeah, the Kingdom was originally designed to be able to be an all-purpose one, so you could have conventions in there, you could do everything, but it was a giant closed block of cement, so massive echo effect, massive all sorts of other problems. And then the tiles off the roof started falling off and almost hitting people. It's a mess. It was just a mess. But, oh well. I'm getting lost on a tangent here. But it is a big deal that they're going to buy the Mariners. And I think they still own the Mariners to this day. They're still involved with that, but it is one of those things where loyalty to Seattle, and everything else. And this comment by Yamauchi that we might move the headquarters there. There's no doubt in my mind that was just pure nonsense.
Yeah,
because they're never ever going to leave Japan. That was just never in the cards. But it was probably a really cool line to give the journalist, to try to make this seem like a, we're here even though we're in Japan type of thing.
Okay.
But, okay.
Yep.
So
we're all out of news, mate.
We're all out of news. That was it. It was a relatively light month. It's, all the big Christmas numbers are probably coming next month. So, Matt, only one thing left to do. What is the word of the episode?
It has to be Raul Julia, because we just talked about how he was, of course, in the Addams Family movie that the pinball table was based on, and then we also started talking about him when we talked about Street Fighter, because there's the wonderful Street Fighter 2 movie as well, where he's M. Bison. So Raul Julia, it is.
I completely concur with that being an amazing choice. So, Mads, tell everybody where they can find you.
So right now you can find me in my cottage. It's no, I am on the Retro Asylum podcast, of course, where we are currently playing. What are we playing? We are playing Day of the Tentacle, actually, which is a game that feels modern to me because I was almost grown up when that came out, I guess. Not really. But Day of the Tentacle we're playing right now at the Game Club. We're having good fun discussing that and some of the very logical puzzles that you get from following three teenagers traveling through time and trying to work together while traveling through time. Mm. And you can also find me on the Playthrough podcast, where we are playing Horizon Zero Dawn at the moment.
Very cool. Do you know how long that one's going to take you to get through?
Horizon Zero Dawn?
Yeah.
Oh, lots and lots of hours. I mean, on the Playthrough podcast, we're never in a hurry. We try to discuss the narrative of these games and in great detail, really. So we'll just slowly grind our way through this game and record maybe 5-6 episodes about that and pick it completely apart.
Very nice. I wish I had enough time to actually do that nowadays. I am envious.
So I've actually brought my PS4 Pro to the cottage this time because it is a long game and I need to play it tomorrow morning before the teenagers get out of bed.
Oh, wow. So you have until noon, right?
Yes, something along those lines.
Awesome. Okay, guys, links to all this in the show notes, links to the Patreon and everything else. And you know what? Have a good one.
Bye.